When I signed the papers, the air in the office seemed almost too still, as if it were holding its breath with me. The house was mine. After years of scraping, saving, of swallowing back tears when life delivered more blows than comforts, I had done something for myself. Not for appearances, not to keep up with anyone else's expectations, and certainly not to appease the constant demands of family who seemed to think my bank account existed for their convenience. No. This was my victory, quiet and deeply personal. I didn't even tell Kevin, my son, because I wanted, just once, for something to be untouched by their opinions. The house wasn't flashy. At least not in the way people like my daughter-in-law Rebecca would define it. To me, though, it was perfection. Tall windows that caught the morning sun, hardwood floors that carried the soft echoes of footsteps, a garden space that whispered promises of roses and herbs in quiet afternoons. Every board, every nail, every inch was mine. I had walked through those rooms and felt them breathe with me. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking into a compromise. I wasn't downsizing to please someone else, or staying in a too large, too lonely house to keep up the illusion of stability. I was claiming something that felt right down to the marrow. Did I remember standing in the foyer on that first afternoon, the scent of fresh paint still in the air, and I pressed my hand against the wall as if it were skin alive, warm. This house will not betray me, I thought. This house will not take the way people have. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. What I didn't know then was how quickly Rebecca would try to sink her claws into it. Rebecca had always been intense. From the very first dinner Kevin brought her to, she dominated the table. She was the kind of woman who never asked questions because she was too busy providing answers no one had requested. Her smile was sweet, rehearsed, her compliments sticky sweet, leaving residue you couldn't wash off. But beneath the performance, her eyes were sharp, assessing. I knew from the beginning she was ambitious, not in the honest way of someone building something with their own hands, but in the way of a crow searching for shiny things to snatch. At first, I tried to ignore it. Kevin loved her. He looked at her with that same starstruck gaze he once had for the boyhood heroes plastered on his walls. I told myself love makes us blind, and perhaps Rebecca would grow into kindness if given enough stability, enough acceptance. But with every year, instead of softening, her edges sharpened. The suggestions became more intrusive, the advice more manipulative. She didn't ask, she maneuvered still, even knowing all this, even sensing her constant hunger for more space, more influence, more of Kevin's spine. I hadn't expected her to involve herself in something so deeply personal to me. I hadn't told her about the house. I hadn't told Kevin either, not yet. That secrecy was my shield. But Rebecca had ways of finding things out. The first hint came from the bank. I was standing in my kitchen, humming softly to the radio, when the representative called to verify the wire transfer. I didn't answer, I was still clearing a spill of coffee. Later, when I returned the call, they mentioned they had already spoken with my power of attorney. My heart stopped. Power of attorney? I had never given that to anyone. My lawyer had drawn up a will, of course, but power of attorney was a serious authority, one I had reserved only for dire emergencies. Who exactly did you speak with? I asked, voice tight. A woman very polite, the man replied. She said she was your daughter-in-law, Rebecca. She had all your details. She assured us it was in your best interest. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. She had answered my phone. She had impersonated me. She had threaded herself into the delicate moment of my purchase, as though it were her right. At first, I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she had panicked, maybe Kevin's phone had died. Maybe she thought she was helping. But deep down I knew better. Rebecca didn't stumble into things. She planned them. A week later, the property manager mentioned something casually that sealed it. Your daughter-in-law has been so helpful, checking in while you've been away. I blinked. Excuse me. Oh yes. She came by, said you wanted her to oversee the renovations. We gave her a key. The blood drained from my face. My fingers trembled as I clutched the edge of the desk. She had inserted herself, lied, claimed authority she did not have. She was watching my house, the one thing I had carved out for myself. Like a hawk circling prey that night, I poured myself a glass of wine. My hands were steady to my surprise. 6 months ago, a betrayal of this scale would have reduced me to shaking sobs. But grief had hardened me. I had lost too much, been disappointed too often. Now betrayal didn't shatter me, it clarified things. Rebecca wasn't simply overstepping. She was plotting. And soon I learned just how far she'd go. Kevin came to visit the following weekend. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. There was a shadow in his eyes I couldn't quite name. "Mom," he started, his voice hesitant. "Rebecca told me you're upset about the house." "Upset?" I repeated slowly. "Is that the word she used?" "She said you might feel left out. Like we were trying to push you. But it wasn't like that. We just thought." "We?" My voice sharpened. "Kevin, tell me exactly what you thought." He swallowed hard, eyes dropping. "It was Rebecca's idea. She thought if we presented the house like it was our plan, you'd feel more comfortable helping. We figured, if you helped with the mortgage later we could buy it from you. You'd get your money back plus appreciation. Everyone wins." I stared at him, unblinking. "Do you hear yourself? You plan to trick me into buying a house from myself." He winced. "When you put it like that, it sounds criminal." "Because it is criminal," I snapped. "It's called fraud." For a long moment, Kevin didn't speak. His shoulders sagged, his head hung low. He looked less like the man I had raised and more like a boy caught cheating on a test, ashamed but not entirely sorry, and in that moment I saw the depth of Rebecca's influence. She had turned my honest, soft-hearted son into someone willing to rationalize theft from his own mother. I pulled out my phone and showed him the footage from my security cameras. Rebecca trying key after key, circling the house like a predator, calling him invisible frustration when none worked. "This was never the plan either, I suppose?" I asked. He buried his face in his hands. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. But I knew better. Rebecca meant for it to go exactly this far, and further." The following morning Rebecca called me directly. Her voice no longer carried the sugar-sweet tone she used for family gatherings. Instead, it was sharp, controlled like a blade. "Margaret," she said, "Kevin told me about your little revelation. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied coolly. "You've been planning to defraud me." "That's such a harsh word," she countered smoothly. "We were just trying to find a solution that worked for everyone." I laughed bitterly. "A solution where you get a mansion and I get the smallest bedroom, and the privilege of paying for it? That's your idea of fair. You're twisting our intentions," she said, her voice dropping lower. "We never wanted to hurt you." "Rebecca," I said firmly. "You answered my phone pretending to be someone with legal authority over my finances. You obtained keys to my property under false pretenses. You've been showing my house to other people without permission. What part of that was meant to help me?" There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted completely. Gone was the veneer of sweetness. In its place was something colder, more dangerous. "Fine," she said flatly. "You want to play hardball? You bought that house to manipulate us. You knew we were looking in that neighborhood, knew we needed space. You bought it just to dangle it in front of us and snatch it away." The accusation was so absurd, so backwards, I actually laughed. "Rebecca, I bought that house as a surprise gift for you and Kevin. I was planning to hand you the deed once the renovations were done." There was a stunned silence on the line. "Right," she said finally, dripping with disbelief. "That's why you kept it secret for 6 weeks." "I kept it secret because I wanted it to be perfect," I said evenly. "I had contractors working day and night to make it right for your family." Another pause, then the words that told me everything I needed to know about her heart. "Prove it. Show me the paperwork that says you intended to transfer ownership to Kevin." And that was when I understood something with bone-deep certainty. Rebecca had never believed generosity was possible. To her, every act of kindness was manipulation. Every gesture was leverage. She couldn't imagine love without strings because she had never lived without pulling them. And I sat there, holding the phone, realizing my sanctuary had become a battleground, and the war had only just begun. After that phone call, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the steam rising from a cup of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. It felt like something inside me had shifted forever. There had been lines, invisible ones, that families instinctively respected, boundaries of trust, of decency, of simple honesty. Rebecca had not just crossed those lines. She had bulldozed them, planted flags, and called it hers. That I thought back to all the compromises I had made over the years. The countless times I swallowed my pride to keep the peace, the gifts I gave without acknowledgement, the emergencies I quietly resolved with money I could have used for myself. Rebecca had never seen these as sacrifices. To her they were entitlements. And Kevin, my son, my own flesh and blood, had let her convince him that deception was just another way to ask for help. 2 mornings later, the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw Kevin's name my heart tugged. Against my better judgment I picked up. "Mom," he said softly, almost timidly, "Rebecca feels like you're being really harsh. She thinks you're punishing her for caring about our future." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temple. "Kevin, your wife impersonated me to the bank. She stole keys to my house under false pretenses. She showed my home to strangers. That isn't caring. That's fraud." There was silence on the other end. Then his voice, weaker now. "Couldn't we just sit down, all of us, and talk it through? Find some way to make it work for everyone?" I looked around my beautiful new living room. The hardwood floors gleamed from where the sun spilled in. The air still smelled faintly of sawdust and paint. For so long, my home had been the one place I compromised, rearranging furniture, repainting walls, allowing clutter or neglect because someone else needed something more urgently. Not this time. This house was mine, and it was the physical embodiment of my boundary. "Kevin," I said carefully, "I'm done making things work for everyone else at my own expense." He didn't answer right away. I could hear his breathing, uneven, as though the weight of my words pressed against his chest. Finally, he whispered, "Rebecca's pregnant." The words dropped like a stone in still water, sending ripples of conflicting emotions through me. Pregnant. My son was going to be a father. I was going to be a grandmother. For a brief, shining moment, joy pierced through the exhaustion and anger. But just as quickly, suspicion crept in. Was this another card in Rebecca's hand, played at the exact moment she needed leverage? "Congratulations," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm happy for you both." Kevin sighed in relief, but then his tone shifted, sliding back into that subtle persuasion I had come to dread. "The thing is, Mom, with a baby coming, we really need more space. Rebecca's morning sickness has been rough. She's worried stress could affect the pregnancy. This house, it's perfect." There it was. The pregnancy wasn't just news. It was ammunition. "Kevin," I said, firm but calm, "there are many lovely homes within your price range. You'll find the right one." "But Mom," he pushed, "Rebecca's already picked out the nursery colors. She's emotionally invested." I nearly laughed. Emotionally invested? In a house she had schemed to steal from me? My heart ached as I realized just how entangled my son had become in her manipulations. That night, I called my lawyer. I laid everything out, the impersonation, the keys, the schemes. He listened carefully, his pen scratching notes. "Mrs. Stevens," he said finally, "based on what you've told me, your daughter-in-law may have committed identity theft, fraud, and trespassing. Do you want to press charges?" The word charges hung in the air like a guillotine. I thought about Rebecca in handcuffs, Kevin's face twisted in shame, the future of my grandchild growing up in chaos. My throat tightened. "Not yet," I said quietly. "But I want everything documented. Every incident. If this escalates, I need to be ready." The very next evening, Rebecca showed up at my door. Alone. For the first time in months, she didn't arrive draped in arrogance. She looked pale, exhausted, her hair pulled back hastily. There were shadows under her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. "Margaret," she began, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard. "Please, can we talk? Just us. No Kevin, no lawyers. No games." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat gingerly on the edge of my sofa, like a guest in a stranger's home rather than the conqueror she had once imagined herself to be. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I handled everything wrong. When I found out about the house, I panicked. Kevin and I have been struggling more than we admitted. His business is slow. I haven't worked since the wedding. We were behind on rent." For the first time, her words had the ring of truth. I could almost feel the vulnerability beneath her usual steel armor. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" I asked softly, her eyes darted away. "Because you've already done so much. The down payment on our apartment. The car repair. The Christmas gifts when Kevin couldn't afford them." I was embarrassed. I understood that kind of pride. I knew what it was to fear asking, to fear appearing weak. But what she had done wasn't born of pride alone. It was born of calculation. So instead of asking, I said slowly, "You decided to trick me." Her lips trembled. "I thought if I made it seem like your idea, you'd feel good about it. I thought I was protecting you from resentment." Her words made me angrier than outright hostility ever could, because underneath the apology was the same poisonous assumption that I was too fragile to handle the truth, that manipulation was somehow kindness. "Rebecca," I said sharply, "I've been managing my own feelings for 63 years. I don't need you to protect me from my own generosity." She flinched. "I know that now. I made a mistake." "You made several," I countered. "Identity theft, fraud, trespassing, lies. Do you want me to continue the list?" Rebecca paled further. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Kevin doesn't know everything." I narrowed my eyes. "What doesn't he know?" She hesitated, her gaze sweeping the room, lingering on the family photographs, the furniture, the small touches of my independence. Finally, she confessed. "He doesn't know I plan to convince you to sign the house over as an early inheritance. For tax purposes." I felt my stomach turn to ice. "Explain." "My uncle's an accountant," she said quickly. "He told me if you gave us the house now, instead of leaving it to Kevin in your will, it would save thousands in estate taxes. I thought, after we'd been living here together for a while, I could bring it up casually." The words were like poison dripping into the room. She had researched it, planned it, not just to live in my house, but to take it from me entirely. "And if I refused?" I asked. Her eyes flickered. "Then I would have suggested it was to protect your assets from nursing home costs. You know, just in case."
I stared at her, horrified.
She had planned not just one manipulation but several, each designed to box me into a corner where saying no would feel selfish, irresponsible, or paranoid. "Rebecca," I said, my voice low, "do you understand that what you're describing is elder financial abuse?" She froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "That's not what this was," she whispered finally. "What else would you call it?" I shot back. "You systematically plotted to trick an older family member into surrendering her assets. That isn't love. That isn't family. That's exploitation." Silence filled the room. Outside, I could hear the laughter of children playing in the park. Normal sounds of normal families living normal lives. Families who didn't spend their evenings planning elaborate schemes to rob each other blind. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked finally, her voice small. "Now," I said firmly, "you and Kevin figure out your housing without involving me. You budget. You work harder. You find something you can actually afford. And you raise your child to understand the difference between asking for help and committing fraud." Rebecca's face crumpled. For the first time, her tears seemed real. She sobbed, broken, exhausted. "Please, we can still make this work. You could live here with us. We could pay rent. Everyone could have what they need." I looked at her for a long moment. At this woman who had plotted to strip me of my home, my money, my dignity. At this woman who still thought trust could be rebuilt with promises as fragile as glass. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "the fact that you think I should trust you after everything tells me you still don't understand how deeply you've betrayed me." Her sobs filled the room. But I didn't waver. I had finally learned the power of saying no. And I intended to hold that power no matter how much it hurt. The days following Rebecca's tearful visit were some of the most unsettling of my life. I had drawn my boundary, stood firm, and spoken truths I never thought I'd have the courage to say aloud. And yet, instead of relief, I carried a constant heaviness in my chest, like a stone pressing down with every breath. Family was supposed to be a source of comfort, of unconditional support, not a battlefield where every word was weighed and twisted into ammunition. My house, this sanctuary I had fought so hard to claim, still gleamed with fresh paint and carried the faint scent of cedar beams. But even here, Rebecca's shadow seemed to linger. Kevin didn't call for 3 days. When he finally did, his voice was strained, brittle with tension. "Mom," he said, skipping any pleasantries, "what exactly did you say to Rebecca? She's been crying non-stop. She told me you called her a criminal." I swallowed, steadying my tone. "Kevin, I didn't call her a criminal. I explained the action she took, and I used the correct words for them. Fraud. Identity theft. Trespassing. Those aren't insults, they're facts. Mom! His voice cracked in that way that took me back to his boyhood, when disappointment threatened to overwhelm him. She's pregnant. She doesn't need this stress. And I don't need to be manipulated, Kevin, I said firmly. Pregnancy is not a shield against accountability. There was silence. A silence so long I could hear him breathing, uneven and heavy. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, I don't even know who to believe anymore. The words cut deeper than I expected. This was my son, the boy I raised, the child whose scraped knees I kissed, whose nightmares I soothed. And here he was, unsure if his mother was telling the truth. Kevin, I said softly, you've known me your entire life. Has there ever been a day where I lied to you about something this important? Again, silence. Then finally, no, but Rebecca swears she was just trying to help us. Kevin, I said gently, listen to the difference between us. I am giving you the truth, hard and unvarnished. She is giving you excuses wrapped in pretty paper. Which one do you trust more? He didn't answer. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying his words, that haunting uncertainty in his voice. If my son couldn't see the truth, if my own child questioned me, what did that mean for our relationship moving forward? 2 weeks passed in uneasy silence. Rebecca didn't reach out again. Kevin sent the occasional text, short, clipped, more like duty than love. How are you? Everything okay? But gone were the long calls, the casual jokes, the updates about his day. My house was peaceful, yes, but the peace felt hollow. Then one afternoon as I returned from the grocery store, I noticed something odd. A car was parked down the street, one I didn't recognize. 2 men sat inside, watching my house with the blankness of people trying not to be noticed. My stomach dropped and I called my neighbor Ellen, who was always watching everything that happened on our block. Oh, those 2, she said when I described them. They've been sitting there off and on for a week. I assumed they were contractors for someone's renovation. But come to think of it, they never get out. Fear prickled up my spine. Could Rebecca have stooped even lower? Could this be some new angle, some underhanded plan involving outsiders? That evening I called Kevin. Are you aware? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, that there are strange men sitting in a car watching my house? What? He sounded genuinely startled. No, of course not. Mom, are you sure? Yes. I've seen them with my own eyes. Ellen confirmed. There was a pause, then Kevin said slowly, I'll talk to Rebecca. The following day, the car was gone. But the relief was short-lived, because that weekend, Kevin and Rebecca arrived together, unannounced. She looked pale, tired, and yet there was still something in her eyes, something sharp, calculating. Kevin, on the other hand, looked like a man caught between 2 worlds. Mom, he began, Rebecca and I need to clear the air. We can't keep going like this. It's tearing us apart. Rebecca placed her hands on her stomach dramatically, as though emphasizing her fragility. This stress isn't good for the baby, she said softly. I gestured toward the chairs. Then sit. But understand this. I won't be bullied, I won't be manipulated, and I won't pretend what happened didn't happen. Rebecca's lips tightened, but she sat. Kevin perched beside her, his hand gripping hers like an anchor. Margaret, Rebecca began, her tone controlled, I made mistakes, but you're blowing them out of proportion. I wasn't trying to steal from you. I was trying to secure a future for your son and your grandchild. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. Rebecca, securing a future does not mean stripping someone else of theirs. What you did was wrong. You know it. I know it. Kevin knows it deep down. Kevin shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Do you want your child? I asked, turning to him. To grow up in a world where lying and scheming are considered love? Or do you want them to grow up knowing that honesty, respect, and hard work are what build a family? Kevin's eyes flickered, the conflict inside him clear as day. Rebecca's hand tightened on his. We're not the enemy, Margaret, she said, her voice suddenly sharp. We're family. Don't you want to be part of this baby's life? Don't you want to hold your grandchild? The words were a dagger aimed straight at my heart. Yes, I wanted that. More than anything. But the price she was asking, the surrender of my dignity, my independence, my home, was too high. Of course I want to be part of my grandchild's life, I said, my voice trembling but firm. But I won't sacrifice who I am to buy that privilege. Tears welled in Kevin's eyes. Rebecca, sensing his wavering, turned to him with a look of desperate urgency. Kevin, if she can't accept us, maybe she shouldn't be in the baby's life at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin stared at her, stunned. Are you saying, he whispered, that you'd keep my child from my own mother? Rebecca's face faltered, realizing she'd gone too far. I just meant… No, Kevin interrupted, his voice breaking. That's exactly what you meant. For the first time I saw a crack in her armor. She had pushed too hard too far. And Kevin, my son, finally saw it. The argument that followed was long, raw, and painful. Kevin accused her of manipulating him, of putting him in impossible positions. Rebecca cried, pleaded, swore she had only wanted the best. I sat quietly, letting the truth unravel between them without interference. When they finally left, Kevin hugged me tightly. His whisper in my ear was barely audible. I don't know what to do, Mom, but I see it now. I see what you meant. That night I wept. Not from sorrow, not from fear, but from a fragile, trembling hope. For the first time I believed my son might find his way back to me, not just as my child, but as a man capable of standing on his own. Still, I knew Rebecca wasn't done. Women like her never surrendered easily, and I had to be ready for whatever storm she brought next. In the weeks that followed, the air around my life felt strangely heavy, as if a storm were brewing just beyond the horizon. Kevin's visit had ended in tears, but also in a glimmer of clarity. For the first time in a long while, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes when he looked at Rebecca. And yet, hope was dangerous. Hope made you lower your guard. I tried to live normally, filling my days with gardening, reading, and quiet walks around the neighborhood. The house, my house, still felt new and strong, each corner whispering of the independence I had fought for. And yet, when I sat in the evenings, tea warming my hands, I found myself staring into space, wondering what Rebecca's next move would be. Because if there was one thing I knew about her by now, it was that she never stopped plotting. Kevin kept in touch more regularly, though always in cautious, careful tones. His words often carried Rebecca's shadow, her influence stitched into the edges of his sentences. But sometimes, just sometimes, I heard him break through, his real self shining in quick, unguarded bursts. Once he called just to ask if I had eaten dinner. Once he told me he missed my pot roast. Once he confessed he couldn't sleep. Everything feels wrong, Mom, he whispered late one night. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time. I listened, my heart aching, but I didn't push. He needed to reach the truth on his own. All I could do was keep the door open. But Rebecca, she was never far.it began with little things. A strange letter slipped into my mailbox, no return address, filled with accusations scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. You're tearing your family apart. Stop being so selfish. Then there were phone calls, silent ones where the line stayed open but no one spoke. I reported them to the phone company, but without proof, there was little to be done. One afternoon, Ellen, my neighbor, came knocking. Margaret, she said, lowering her voice, I don't want to stir trouble, but I thought you should know. I saw Rebecca here the other day when you weren't home. My stomach dropped. Are you sure? As sure as I am that the sun rises, she said. She was standing by your porch, peeking through the window. When she saw me watching, she walked off quick as anything. That night I checked every lock, every window twice. I lay in bed listening for the creak of floorboards, the rustle of curtains, the whisper of someone not meant to be there. It was paranoia maybe, but paranoia built on truth. The next time Kevin visited alone, I told him, Your wife is sneaking around my house. He looked stricken. Mom, are you sure? She said she was at a doctor's appointment. I gave him Ellen's testimony. I showed him the strange letter. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than his years. I don't know what to do anymore, he said, voice cracking. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Then it's time, I said quietly, for you to choose. For your own sake. For your child's sake. Not for me, not even for her. But for you. He didn't answer, but his silence was heavy with thought. A week later, Rebecca returned, this time bold and defiant. She came in the evening, knocking with a sharpness that made the door rattle. When I opened it, her eyes glittered with a kind of feverish determination. We need to talk, she announced, Stepping inside without waiting for permission, I didn't move to stop her. Instead, I folded my arms and waited. "I can't have you poisoning Kevin against me," she said, her voice rising with each word. "I won't let you destroy my family." I arched a brow. "Funny. That's exactly what I could say about you." Her face flushed. "You're selfish. You have everything, this house, your independence. You should be happy for us, happy to help us start fresh. Why can't you see that?" "Because helping doesn't mean surrendering," I replied calmly. "And love doesn't mean control." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're so wise, so righteous. But let me tell you something, Margaret. Kevin is mine. This baby is mine. And if you don't back down, you'll find yourself very, very alone." Her words echoed in the air, venomous and sharp. For a moment, fear clawed at my chest. But then something stronger rose, anger, yes, but also clarity. "You underestimate me, Rebecca," I said, my voice low but steady. "I've lived a long life. I've endured loss, hardship, betrayal far worse than anything you can conjure. If you think you can break me with threats, you're mistaken. I will not surrender my home. I will not surrender my dignity. And if you try to take my son from me, you will lose more than you ever imagined." She stared at me, stunned, as if she hadn't expected me to fight back with such force. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook that I stood there, trembling, adrenaline rushing through my veins. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was war. In the days that followed, the tension escalated. Kevin grew distant again, clearly torn between loyalty to his wife and the truth gnawing at his conscience. Rebecca, meanwhile, grew bolder. She left messages on my phone, half apologies laced with veiled threats. She sent gifts, tiny baby clothes wrapped in pastel paper, as if dangling the promise of my grandchild before me like bait. And then came the final blow. A letter arrived in the mail, official looking, with legal jargon sprawled across the top. It was a notice of intent. Rebecca was contesting ownership of the house. She claimed Kevin had partial rights through marital property laws, that I had unfairly excluded them from what should have been a shared family asset. My hands shook as I read the words. My sanctuary, my freedom, the home I had built with care. It was under attack, not with keys or lies this time, but with the cold machinery of the law. I sank into a chair, the paper crumpling in my grip. Tears stung my eyes, but behind them burned a fire I hadn't felt in years. No, this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of my stand. The morning after I received that letter, I woke with a knot in my stomach and a pounding in my head. Sleep had been impossible. My mind kept replaying Rebecca's voice, her threats, her lies, and now this. An official attempt to rip away the very thing that symbolized my freedom. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at the notice. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was a clear warning that she intended to push me into a corner. For a long time I simply sat there, paralyzed, every doubt I'd ever had about myself rising like ghosts. Was I too old for this fight? Was I strong enough to go against someone so ruthless? But then I looked around at the house, the walls freshly painted, the shelves lined with books, the garden outside blooming with late summer roses, and I remembered why I had bought it in the first place. This wasn't just a property. It was my life, my sanctuary, the proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet even after loss, even after betrayal. No one, especially not Rebecca, was going to take it from me. So I called my lawyer. "We're moving forward," I told him firmly. "I want every defense prepared, every document in order. She thinks she can scare me. She's wrong." He chuckled softly. "Good. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. She doesn't have much of a case, but intimidation is a powerful tool. Don't let it get to you." "I won't," I said, though my voice trembled slightly. That day marked the start of a new routine. Every morning I gathered paperwork. Bank statements, deeds, renovation contracts, proof of ownership, proof of payment. I filled entire binders with records, each page a shield against her lies. At night, I reviewed them until my eyes blurred, willing myself to memorize every line. Kevin visited once during that time, his face pale, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man carrying a boulder up a mountain. "Mom," he said quietly, "Rebecca told me she sent you a notice. She said it was just to open a conversation, not to hurt you." I almost laughed. A legal threat is not a conversation, Kevin. It's war. Do you understand that? He winced. She feels like you're shutting her out. She's scared. With the baby coming. I slammed my hand on the table harder than I meant to. Don't you dare use that child as leverage. Not with me. Not ever. He flinched, looking like a boy again. Like the child I'd once comforted through nightmares. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. But I don't want to lose her either. You're not choosing between us, I said firmly. You're choosing between right and wrong. Between honesty and deceit. Between building a family on trust or on manipulation. That's what this is, Kevin. Don't fool yourself otherwise. He left without answering. My heart broke for him, but I couldn't soften my stance. If I did, Rebecca would win. Days blurred into weeks. The stress showed in the mirror. New lines etched across my forehead, shadows under my eyes. But with each passing day, I felt my resolve harden. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, for my right to live without being used. Rebecca, meanwhile, escalated. She sent texts filled with sugar-coated poison. Let's just be reasonable, Margaret. Think of Kevin. Think of the baby. Other times they were outright threats. If you keep this up, you'll regret it. Once I found her car parked across the street from my house, engine idling, her eyes fixed on my front door. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. And yet, I refused to hide. Instead, I began documenting everything. Photos of her car, screenshots of her texts, recordings of her calls. If she wanted a battle, I would make sure the truth stood tall beside me. One evening, I invited my neighbors over again. Ellen, the widow across the street, the young family at the corner. We shared a meal, laughter filling the house, warmth radiating through the walls. For a few hours, I almost forgot the storm outside. At one point, Ellen leaned close and said softly, "You're stronger than you think, Margaret. I've watched you stand up for yourself in ways many people never could. Don't let her break you." Her words became a kind of mantra. The showdown finally came when my lawyer called. "She's filed official papers," he said. "We'll need to appear in court." Court. The word sent shivers down my spine, but also a strange sense of relief. At least now it would be out in the open. At least now the truth would be judged. The day of the hearing, I dressed carefully. A simple navy dress, pearl earrings, shoes polished until they shone. I wanted to look composed, unshakable, even if my insides churned. Rebecca arrived in a tailored suit, her belly rounded with pregnancy, her expression one of carefully crafted innocence. Kevin trailed behind her, eyes downcast. When the judge asked for opening statements, Rebecca's lawyer painted me as controlling, manipulative, a woman unwilling to share her resources with her struggling family. They framed her as the dutiful wife, the expectant mother desperate to secure a safe home for her child. It was almost convincing. Almost. Then my lawyer stood. He spoke with clarity and precision, outlining the facts. My purchase of the house, the falsified phone call to my bank, the unauthorized keys, the trespassing, the documented lies. He presented security footage, text messages, neighbor testimony. Piece by piece, he dismantled her narrative until it lay in ruins. Rebecca's face twisted as the evidence mounted, her mask slipping in tiny cracks. I saw the judge's eyes harden, the courtroom grow still. When it was my turn to speak, I rose, my hands trembling slightly but my voice steady. "I bought that house," I said, "to give my family a gift, a place to grow, to build memories. But instead of gratitude, I was met with deception. Instead of honesty, I was met with lies. I am not selfish. I am not cruel. I am a mother who has given and given until there was almost nothing left of me. And I refuse to let my generosity be twisted into a weapon against me." Silence fell over the courtroom. For a moment, even Rebecca looked shaken. The judge ruled in my favor. Of course she did, the evidence was overwhelming. But still, when the gavel struck, when the case was dismissed, I felt a rush of emotion so strong it nearly knocked me off my feet. Relief, vindication, and something fiercer. Triumph. Rebecca stormed out without a word, Kevin following helplessly. I sat down, my hands covering my face, tears spilling freely. My lawyer placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said gently. "You stood your ground. But the fight wasn't over." I knew that. Rebecca would lick her wounds, plot anew. People like her didn't simply give up. But for now, for this moment, I had one. That night, I returned home and stood in the middle of my living room, the house quiet around me. I placed my hand against the wall, feeling its solid strength. This was mine. Not just the house, but the strength to protect it. The strength to protect myself. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. In the days after court, the silence was deafening. No late-night phone calls. No guilt-drenched messages. No Rebecca lurking in her car across the street. It was as if the storm had finally passed, leaving behind wreckage but also a clear, open sky. At first, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I found myself checking my phone out of habit, expecting some new threat or manipulation. But there was nothing. Just the soft hum of everyday life returning. I took long walks again, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. I hosted small dinners for neighbors. I even joined Ellen's book club, where we spent more time laughing about old memories than actually discussing novels. Slowly, I felt life trickling back into me. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, not for someone else's approval or needs. Kevin, however, was not quiet. He called every Sunday, his voice heavy with guilt and confusion. "Mom, I don't know who I am anymore," he admitted once. "I thought I was being a good husband, but I let myself be blind. I let Rebecca steer everything. Being a husband doesn't mean surrendering your morals," I told him gently. "It means standing beside your partner, not behind them." There were long pauses in those conversations. I could hear him wrestling with his own demons, his own shame. Sometimes I wanted to reach through the phone, hold him the way I had when he was a child, tell him everything would be all right. But he wasn't a child anymore. He had to rebuild himself. Rebecca, meanwhile, kept her distance. She showed her true colors in court, and though she hadn't faced criminal charges, she carried the weight of public humiliation. Word traveled quickly in our community, and she couldn't twist the story into her favor this time. People whispered. Neighbors who once greeted her with smiles now looked away. When the baby was born, a girl, delicate and perfect, I went to the hospital with Kevin's invitation. Rebecca gave me a polite but cold nod, her eyes sharp with unspoken words. But when I held my granddaughter, all of that melted away. She was so small, so pure, untouched by deceit or bitterness. In that moment, I promised myself that whatever storms came, I would protect her from them. Months passed. Kevin worked harder to mend our bond. He asked me to dinner, just the two of us. He admitted he was in counseling. He wanted to rebuild, not just with me, but with himself. It was slow, awkward, sometimes painful, but real. Rebecca was another matter. Though she never again tried to take my house, her manipulative streak didn't vanish. She dropped subtle comments during family gatherings, hints that I was overreacting, that she had only been trying to help. She painted herself as misunderstood, as if her schemes were simply the product of love gone astray, but I no longer bit the bait. I smiled politely, nodded when necessary, and then walked away. I had learned the most important lesson of my life. You cannot save someone determined to drown in their own lies. The real turning point came months later when my lawyer, curious about the depth of Rebecca's patterns, did some digging into her past. What he uncovered chilled me. "This isn't the first time she's done this," he said. "Her grandmother signed over her house under suspicious circumstances years ago. Similar manipulation tactics, similar promises. The pattern is undeniable." I sat in stunned silence as he explained. Rebecca hadn't stumbled into elder financial abuse out of desperation. She had learned it, practiced it, perfected it. It was in many ways a family tradition, and I had nearly fallen into the same trap. That knowledge changed everything. My anger gave way to something else, resolve. If I had survived this, I had a responsibility not just to myself but to others who might face the same. So I started speaking out. Quietly at first, at neighborhood gatherings, at Ellen's book club, at community meetings. I told my story not as a victim but as a warning. Elder abuse isn't always about bruises, I said. Sometimes it's about signatures, persuasion, manipulation. Sometimes it comes wearing a smile and calling you family. People listened. They shared their own stories, accounts of children, in-laws, even siblings who had tried to coerce them out of property, savings, dignity. I realized I wasn't alone. None of us were. Kevin supported me in this. He even attended one meeting with me, standing quietly at the back. Later he said, I didn't know, Mom. I didn't know how common it was. I thought we were unique. No, I told him gently. We were just one story among many. But we chose not to let it define us. That's the difference. Rebecca never joined those conversations. She stayed in her world, polite but distant, civil but unrepentant. I could see it in her eyes. She still believed I had overreacted, still thought she was the victim. Some people never learn. But I had one spring afternoon, nearly a year after the court battle, I hosted another dinner party. The house glowed with laughter, the table heavy with food. Neighbors, friends, people who had become my chosen family filled the rooms. And for the first time I realized something profound. I wasn't lonely anymore. I still saw Kevin, of course. He brought the baby often, and I cherished every moment with her. But I no longer hungered for Rebecca's approval, or even Kevin's constant presence. I had rebuilt my own life, my own circle, my own strength. As the evening wound down, I stood in the doorway watching my guests leave, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. My granddaughter's laughter still echoed in my ears. I felt a peace settle in me, deep and steady. My phone buzzed. A text from Kevin. Mom, thank you for tonight. Thank you for not giving up on me. I know I failed you, but I'm trying. I typed back. You're my son. That's all that matters. Keep trying. That's enough. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped outside into the twilight. The roses in the garden swayed gently in the breeze, their fragrance sweet and alive. This house, this life, it was mine. Hard won, fiercely protected, but mine. And as I stood there, I realized the truth I had been searching for all along. Sometimes love means giving. Sometimes it means forgiving. But sometimes, most importantly, it means drawing a line and saying, no more. And that, I thought with a small satisfied smile, is the greatest gift we can ever give ourselves. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.